She gave her last mare to two dying Comanche brothers. At dawn, every warrior bowed before her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. In the early hours of a bitter winter morning, the wind howled through the canyon, carrying with it the scent of pine and dust. Amid the frozen expanse of the high plains, two Comanche brothers, scarred from battle, lay dying under a makeshift shelter. Their horses had long since fallen, and the cold was relentless. Each breath they took was labored, each heartbeat a reminder of how close they were to the end. Their bodies had been ravaged by wounds, their strength drained by the harsh elements. But there was hope in their eyes, a hope that perhaps fate would intervene, as it so often does for the desperate. That hope was about to come in the form of a lone rider, a woman whose heart was as strong as the land she called home. Sarah, a rancher's daughter, had been raised on these plains, a survivor by necessity. Her last mare, a fine creature born of the best stock, was all she had left. The mare was her partner, her protector, and the last tether she had to a life she once knew before the battles of survival wore her down. Sarah had seen many hardships in her life, but nothing had prepared her for the sight she found as she rode into the canyon that day. The two Comanche brothers were slumped against the rocks, their hands clutching the remnants of their weapons. Their faces were pale, their eyes distant, as if they had already crossed over into the next world. Without a second thought, Sarah dismounted. She had no time to lose. The mare would give her the speed and strength she needed to save them. She led the mare to the two men, offering the animal to them, knowing full well that this was the last of her own means of survival. But her compassion was greater than her fear. With a steady hand, she guided the brothers onto the mare's back, lifting them with all the strength she could muster. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, casting golden light across the canyon, Sarah rode beside them, guiding them through the treacherous paths with the skill of someone who had lived this life her whole existence. They made it through the night, and by morning, when the sun rose high above the mountains, a great change had occurred. The Comanche warriors, once skeptical of a woman's ability to save them, now saw her for who she truly was, a hero. At dawn, the brothers were safe, and as Sarah dismounted, exhausted but triumphant, she saw the tribe's warriors kneel before her. One by one, they bowed in respect, not just for her bravery, but for the life she had saved, two lives that would forever be indebted to her. The sun now rose higher, casting its light on the land, symbolizing a new chapter. Sarah had given everything to save them, and in return, she had earned the respect of the very people who were once considered enemies. But as the warriors bowed before her, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. A life debt had been formed, and her place among the Comanche had just begun. The sun hung high over the rugged landscape of the Comanche territory, casting long shadows across the rolling plains. Sarah stood at the edge of the camp, watching as the warriors began their daily routines. The brothers she had saved, now fully recovered, were training with their weapons, their movements swift and fluid. It was a sign of respect, a way for them to show their gratitude to the woman who had risked everything to save them. As the camp buzzed with activity, Sarah found herself struggling to settle into the new life that had been thrust upon her. She had never imagined that one act of mercy would lead her here, to the heart of a tribe she had once feared. But there she was, surrounded by warriors, each with their own story, their own pain, their own journey. And now, she was a part of it. The once distant land that had been nothing more than a series of challenges and threats now felt like a strange, new home. But it wasn't just the land that had changed. It was her too. As the days passed, Sarah found herself slowly accepted into the fold. The tribe had begun to call her the Protector, a title she had never sought but now bore with honor. The brothers, who once viewed her as an outsider, now treated her with the utmost respect. Their gratitude was palpable, but so was the weight of their debt. They had survived, but they owed their lives to her, and that bond was not one they would easily forget. But as Sarah settled into her new life, She began to realize that the peace she had brought to the brothers had not yet reached the rest of the tribe. The chief, though respectful of Sarah, had not yet fully embraced her presence in the tribe. He saw her as a necessary ally, but he also viewed her as an outsider, someone who could not fully understand the complexities of Comanche life. He did not yet see her as one of them. One evening, as the camp gathered around the fire for a ceremonial feast, Sarah noticed the chief's piercing gaze resting on her. It was a look she had grown accustomed to, one that seemed to ask a silent question. Why was she here? What was her true purpose? Sarah knew the answer, but she also knew it was not something she could easily convey. She had saved 2 lives, but that did not automatically make her a part of their world. The journey ahead would be long, and she would have to prove herself. The chief rose from his seat, his presence commanding attention. As he spoke, his words were measured, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "Tonight, we honor the spirit of survival," he said, his eyes scanning the group. "But we also honor the strength that comes from unity. Sarah, you have shown us that strength. But strength is not just in the act of saving lives. It is in the ability to live alongside us, to share in our burdens and our triumphs." The fire crackled as Sarah felt the eyes of the tribe upon her. It was an invitation, but also a test. Could she truly belong to this world, or was she destined to remain an outsider, forever marked by her previous life? The chief's voice cut through her thoughts. "Tonight, you will prove your place. Join us in the hunt." Sarah's heart raced as the tribe's warriors stood in unison, preparing for the hunt. She had heard of the legendary hunts that Comanche warriors undertook, but she had never participated. It was a rite of passage, a test of her ability to survive in their world. The brothers she had saved gave her a nod of encouragement, but their eyes betrayed a hint of doubt. They had never seen a woman hunt alongside the warriors, and neither had the rest of the tribe. But Sarah was determined to prove herself. As the group set off into the vast wilderness, Sarah felt a sense of resolve wash over her. This was her chance to show that she could be more than just a savior. She could be a warrior, a protector, someone who belonged. The hunt was brutal, and the wilderness unforgiving. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she kept pace with the warriors, her senses sharpened by the harsh realities of the land. The brothers, though still weak from their earlier injuries, fought beside her with the ferocity of the strongest warriors. They had become her allies, but tonight, they were all equals in the hunt. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the group closed in on their prey. Sarah's eyes locked onto the target, a wild stag, its antlers gleaming in the fading light. With a signal from the chief, the group moved as one, circling the animal and closing in for the kill. In that moment, Sarah felt the rush of adrenaline she had never known before. The tribe's warriors moved with precision, their training evident in every movement. Sarah, too, moved with purpose, her instincts guiding her as she joined the attack. The stag fell, its massive body crashing to the ground, and the group erupted in a cheer of triumph. Sarah stood among them, breathless but proud. She had proven herself not just to the tribe, but to herself. As the warriors celebrated the kill, Sarah stood at the edge of the group, her thoughts racing. The chief's words had rung true. Strength was not just in the act of saving lives. It was in living alongside them, sharing their burdens, and embracing their ways. The hunt had been her test, and she had passed. But the real challenge was yet to come. She had earned their respect, but, in the days to come, she would have to prove that she truly belonged. And so, as the moon rose over the plains, Sarah knew that her journey with the Comanche had only just begun. The days that followed the hunt were marked by silence and contemplation. Sarah, though celebrated by the warriors, felt the weight of her new life settling in. The respect she had earned in the hunt had gained her a position among the tribe, but it also left her questioning what she truly sought. The brothers she had saved, though now fully healed, no longer needed her constant care. They had become part of the rhythm of the camp, their fierce loyalty to her unwavering. But Sarah's role as their protector now felt less defined. She had become a part of their world, but the world around her was still foreign. The chief, whose words about unity had lingered in Sarah's mind, had shown her that her place in the tribe was still something to prove. She wasn't just a healer or a protector anymore. She was expected to live as one of them, to understand their ways, to earn the right to stay. But how could she fully belong when so much of their world was still a mystery to her? Late one afternoon, as the camp settled into its usual routine, Sarah found herself standing at the edge of the cliffs that overlooked the plains. The wind whipped through her hair as she stared into the distance, her thoughts adrift. The landscape, so vast and untouched, was both a comfort and a reminder of how far she had come. She had chosen this life, had embraced it in the face of danger and uncertainty, but now, she wondered if she had made the right choice. The distant sound of horses approached, and Sarah turned to find the two brothers, now fully recovered, riding towards her. Their faces were painted with the bright hues of their tribe, and their expressions were solemn, yet proud. They dismounted with ease, their movements as graceful as they were powerful. The taller brother, who had been the first to recover from his wounds, stepped forward, his eyes meeting hers with a knowing look. "The chief has sent for you," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken expectation. Sarah's heart raced at the mention of the chief. She had been expecting this. The time had come for her to prove herself once again. Without a word, she followed the brothers as they led her deeper into the heart of the camp. The warriors, who had once regarded her with curiosity, now watched her with respect. She had earned it, but she knew that respect was fragile. The chief was waiting near the ceremonial fire, his figure cloaked in shadows as the flickering flames danced around him. He did not speak at first, but Sarah could feel the power of his presence. The brothers had gathered around him, and now, the entire tribe had fallen silent, waiting for what would come next. Finally, the chief spoke, his voice deep and resonant, like the earth itself. "Sarah, you have proven yourself in the hunt. You have saved lives, you have fought alongside us, and you have earned our respect," he said, his gaze unwavering. But respect alone does not make a warrior. Sarah stood tall, her hands clenched at her sides. She knew this was the test she had been preparing for, but the words still stung. The chief's gaze softened ever so slightly. "You must show us that you can survive the trials of the land. Only then will you truly be one of us." The air around her seemed to still, the weight of the tribe's gaze pressing down on her. Sarah's thoughts flashed to the land she had left behind, the life she had known before. But this was her life now, and there was no turning back. She nodded, her voice steady as she spoke. "I will prove myself." The chief gave a single, sharp nod, signaling the end of the conversation. As he turned away, Sarah felt a sense of finality settle over her. This was it. The trial would come, and it would determine whether she truly belonged. Over the next few days, Sarah prepared herself for the trials ahead. She gathered supplies, sharpened her knives, and honed her skills. The tribe had provided her with everything she needed, but it was up to her to prove she could survive the land on her own. The trial would take her deep into the wilderness, to a place where only the strongest could endure. It was said that no one who entered the trial unprepared ever returned unchanged. The thought of what awaited her unsettled Sarah, but she welcomed the challenge. She was ready to prove that she belonged here, that the life she had chosen was worth the price. On the morning of the trial, Sarah stood at the edge of the camp, the early light casting long shadows over the plains. The brothers who had once been her patients, now her comrades, stood beside her. They, too, would face the trial, but they would not accompany her. The chief had given them their own task. The moment was hers alone. The first step was the hardest. As Sarah entered the wilderness, the sounds of the camp faded behind her, replaced by the raw, untamed noise of the land. The wind whispered through the trees, the earth beneath her feet seemed to pulse with life, and the distant calls of predators echoed in the distance. It was a land that tested every fiber of her being, a land that demanded respect. For the first time since arriving in the tribe, Sarah felt truly alone, and yet, she knew she was never truly isolated. She had the land to guide her, and she had her resolve to keep her moving forward. As the day wore on, Sarah navigated the rugged terrain with a focus she had never known. She climbed steep ridges, crossed fast-moving streams, and avoided the dangers that lurked in the shadows. The sun began to dip below the horizon, and Sarah knew she had to find shelter before nightfall. Her eyes scanned the land, seeking a place to rest, a place where she could catch her breath and prepare for the trials to come. And then, in the distance, she saw it. A small cave, tucked beneath the cliff face. just large enough to offer refuge from the elements. As she made her way toward it, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. This was her moment. She had survived the day, and she would survive whatever the next day held in store. But little did Sarah know, the true test was just beginning. The cave was small, but it provided shelter from the elements. Sarah entered cautiously, the sound of her breath steady but quick from the long day's journey. The sky outside had shifted from a bright blue to a dull orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air was growing colder, and the breeze was carrying the chill of the coming night. Inside the cave, Sarah felt a momentary sense of peace. She had made it through the first day, but the true test was far from over. She set down her pack and unwrapped the supplies she had gathered earlier in the day. A small fire would be necessary to keep the cold at bay, but she knew she had to be careful. The smoke could attract unwanted attention, and the land here was full of predators. Her fingers worked quickly, setting up her small fire pit. As the flames flickered to life, she sat back on her heels, her thoughts racing. The trial wasn't just about surviving the physical challenges of the wilderness. It was about proving that she could endure the harshness of this world, a world that didn't care for weakness. A world where survival was a constant battle. Sarah had seen enough of the Comanche way of life to understand the stakes. Every warrior had to prove themselves, and now it was her turn. The night crept in around her as the fire crackled softly. The silence of the cave was broken only by the occasional snap of the firewood and the distant howls of wolves. Sarah knew she couldn't afford to rest for long. Tomorrow, she would face more challenges, and she had to be ready. But for now, the warmth of the fire and the solitude offered a brief respite. Her mind drifted back to the brothers, to the day she had saved them. The gratitude in their eyes had been genuine, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to prove. The tribe had accepted her, but they hadn't truly embraced her yet. She wasn't one of them, at least, not completely. She had earned their respect, but respect alone was not enough. She had to live like them, think like them, fight like them. The morning would bring the next challenge. As the fire began to die down, Sarah lay down on the cold stone floor of the cave, wrapping herself in her blankets. Her mind wandered, but sleep came hard. She knew the next few days would test her body and spirit. The trial wasn't just about survival. It was about understanding the land, the people, and the strength that came from both. It wasn't enough to be a protector. She had to become one of them, fully and without hesitation. The thought gnawed at her as she closed her eyes and drifted into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, Sarah awoke to the sound of birds in the distance, the first light of dawn breaking through the mouth of the cave. She gathered her things quickly, the urgency of the trial weighing heavily on her. As she stepped outside, the chill of the early morning air hit her face, and the vast, empty landscape stretched before her. The world was still, the only movement coming from the slight rustling of the grass in the breeze. She moved forward, her steps measured and deliberate. She had learned to move silently over the years, and it served her well now as she crossed the open terrain. The challenge was simple: make it through the wilderness and return to the camp, where the tribe would judge her performance. It wasn't just about survival, but about how she adapted to the land. The journey was long and grueling, the terrain unforgiving. Sarah moved swiftly, but with caution, keeping her eyes on the horizon for any signs of danger. The landscape seemed to close in on her as she navigated the rocky ridges, her legs growing tired but her resolve unbroken. As she climbed a particularly steep incline, she spotted something in the distance: movement. A figure emerged from behind a cluster of trees. It was another warrior, his figure barely visible against the backdrop of the landscape. He stood still for a moment, as if waiting for her to notice him. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't hesitate. She had no time to be caught off guard. The warrior raised his hand in greeting, but she knew better than to trust anyone without question. She slowed her pace, keeping a careful distance as the man stepped forward. His eyes studied her, and she could see the tension in his posture. "The chief sent me," the warrior said, his voice low. "You must complete the trial." Sarah nodded, her hand instinctively reaching for the knife at her side. She was prepared, but the sudden appearance of the warrior had rattled her. The trial had just begun, and she could feel the weight of her actions already. The warrior turned and motioned for her to follow. They walked in silence for what felt like an eternity, the landscape growing harsher. With every step, Sarah's mind raced as she wondered what the trial had in store for her. This was not just about physical endurance. It was about proving that she could live among them, understand their ways, and survive as they did. She had already faced the wilderness on her own, but now she was about to face something else, a test of her place in their world. As they continued, the warrior spoke again, this time with more urgency. You will face your greatest challenge today. It is not the land you must conquer, but the fear within you. His words echoed in her mind as they continued on their journey. Sarah felt the weight of them, the pressure mounting with every step. This was more than just a test of survival. It was a test of her spirit. The warrior led Sarah through the dense forest, the silence between them broken only by the sound of their footsteps crunching on the dry leaves beneath. Sarah's mind was heavy with questions. What was this trial truly about? The wilderness she had already survived, but now, the warrior's words about fear rang in her ears, unsettling her in a way she couldn't quite explain. They had been walking for hours, with no sign of their destination. The landscape had grown more rugged, the trees more sparse, and the ground harder to navigate. Every step was more difficult than the last, and Sarah's legs were beginning to burn with fatigue. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. The warrior remained in front of her, moving with the ease of someone who had walked these paths for years, perhaps decades. He glanced back at her occasionally, but his eyes were focused, as though he was waiting for something to happen. The deeper they moved into the forest, the more isolated Sarah felt. The air seemed thicker here, and the landscape was less familiar. She could feel the weight of the land pressing in on her, as though the very earth was watching her, judging her. We are close. The warrior finally spoke, his voice low and steady. You must face your fear here. Only then will you understand what it means to belong. Sarah's heart raced. She didn't understand. What was this fear she needed to confront? She had already faced the wilderness, had already fought to survive. But the warrior's words, so cryptic, had left her unsettled. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The warrior didn't answer right away. Instead, he stopped walking and turned to face her. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the forest was beginning to darken. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, as if the night itself was closing in. There are forces within you, the warrior said, his eyes locking with hers. The fear you have is not of the land. It is of yourself. You must face the part of you that holds you back, the part that doubts your place here. Sarah stared at him, confusion clouding her thoughts. She had never been one to doubt herself. She had always been strong, had always survived. But the warrior's words stirred something inside her, something she had buried deep down. The fear of not truly belonging. The fear that no matter how much she gave, no matter how much she sacrificed, she would always be an outsider. You will face the trial alone, the warrior said, his voice no longer a whisper but a command. Only then will you be one of us. Sarah's heart pounded as the realization struck her. She had to do this on her own. The land, the tribe, the warriors, none of them could help her now. It was her fight, her fear to confront. The warrior stepped back, disappearing into the shadows, leaving Sarah standing alone in the clearing. The silence around her seemed deafening. She took a deep breath, her mind racing as she surveyed her surroundings. She had faced countless challenges before, but this was different. This was not about surviving the elements or fighting for her life. This was about confronting the fear that had lived inside her from the moment she had joined the tribe. The fear that no matter how much she gave, it would never be enough. She walked slowly, her eyes scanning the darkening forest, her senses on high alert. Every rustling leaf, every snap of a twig seemed amplified in the growing darkness. She moved cautiously, each step feeling heavier than the last. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches twisting in the wind. The fear that had been gnawing at her since she first set foot in the tribe seemed to rise within her. She was an outsider. No matter how much she fought, no matter how much she proved herself, she would never truly belong. The thoughts swirled in her mind, growing louder, more insistent. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught her eye. She froze, her heart racing as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a warrior, his face painted, his eyes cold and unyielding. He stepped forward, his movements deliberate. Sarah's pulse quickened. She had been expecting this, another test, another challenge. But as the warrior drew closer, something inside her shifted. The fear she had been holding on to for so long began to fade, replaced by something stronger. Determination. She had nothing to prove to anyone but herself. She was here, in this land, for a reason. She had survived the trials of the wilderness, and now she was ready to face the trial of her own fears. The warrior stopped in front of her, his eyes searching hers for a sign of weakness. But Sarah stood tall, her body steady, her mind clear. The warrior, sensing her change, nodded slowly. "You have faced your fear," he said, his voice low. "You are ready." As he turned and walked away, Sarah stood in the clearing, the weight of his words settling in. The trial was not just about surviving the wilderness. It was about confronting the fears within. She had faced her own doubts, her own insecurities, and had come out stronger. She was no longer an outsider. She was a part of this land, this tribe, and she would fight to prove it. As Sarah stood alone in the clearing, her heart still racing from the trial she had just faced, the weight of the chief's words echoed in her mind. She had confronted her deepest fear and had emerged stronger, but now the path forward was unclear. The land she had come to embrace felt both familiar and alien, and she could feel the eyes of the tribe upon her, watching, waiting for her next move. The warrior who had guided her through the wilderness had disappeared into the shadows, leaving her to process what had just happened. Sarah had thought the trials of the wilderness would be the hardest part, but now she realized the true test was yet to come. She had proven herself to the land, but proving herself to the tribe was a different challenge altogether. The warriors respected her for what she had done, but respect alone would not make her one of them. She needed to show them that she could live their way, that she could survive not just the land, but the complex world of the Comanche people. As the sun began to sink behind the mountains, Sarah's thoughts turned to the next step. The chief had said she was ready, but for what? To join the tribe? To become one of them? Or was this just the beginning of a much longer journey, one that would test her loyalty, her strength, and her resolve? The sound of footsteps broke her reverie, and she turned to find the two brothers approaching. They had been at her side since the moment she saved them, their bond to her unspoken but undeniable. The taller brother, the one who had been most injured, stepped forward, his eyes soft with a mixture of gratitude and something else, concern. "The chief has called for you," he said, his voice steady but filled with an unspoken weight. Sarah's heart sank. She had expected this moment, but she was not prepared for it. She followed the brothers through the camp, her thoughts still swirling. The tribe had gathered around the central fire, the warmth of the flames casting long shadows over their faces. The chief stood at the center of the group, his posture commanding attention. He looked at Sarah as she approached, his gaze unreadable. The warriors, who had once viewed her with suspicion, now watched her with a mixture of respect and uncertainty. She had earned their respect, but earning their trust was something else entirely. The chief stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Sarah, you have passed the trials of the land. You have faced your fear and come through stronger. But there is one final trial you must face." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. The trials had seemed endless, and now, the chief spoke of another one. What more could she prove? The chief's eyes softened as he continued. "You have proven yourself in the wilderness, but now you must prove yourself in the heart of the tribe. You will lead us in the hunt, not as an outsider, but as one of us." The words hit Sarah like a wave crashing against the shore. She was being asked to lead, to take on a role she had never imagined. The warriors looked. To her, their eyes filled with a silent question. Could she do it? Could she be the leader they needed? The brothers stood behind her, their expressions unreadable. Sarah's mind raced, but she didn't hesitate. She had come this far, and she would not back down now. "I will lead," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions brewing inside her. The chief nodded, his approval clear in his gaze. "Then prepare yourself. The hunt will begin at dawn." That night, Sarah could hardly sleep. She lay awake, the weight of the chief's words pressing down on her. She had proven herself in the wilderness, but this was different. Leading a hunt was a responsibility unlike anything she had faced before. She had to show the tribe that she was not just a protector, but a leader. At dawn, Sarah rose early, her mind sharp and focused. The camp was already alive with activity as the warriors prepared for the hunt. The brothers who had once been her patients were now her companions in this new challenge. They offered her words of encouragement, but their eyes betrayed a hint of doubt. She could feel their concerns, but she refused to let them shake her resolve. The chief gave her the lead, placing his trust in her, and as they rode out together, Sarah felt the weight of that trust more than ever. The hunt was grueling, the land unforgiving as always. The group moved swiftly through the thick underbrush, tracking their prey with the precision of seasoned hunters. Sarah led the group with confidence, her instincts guiding her every move. But as the day wore on, something shifted inside her. She could feel the responsibility of her role pressing down on her, and for the first time since she had joined the tribe, she felt truly vulnerable. The hunt was more than just a test of skill. It was a test of her ability to lead, to inspire those around her. She was no longer just a participant. She was the one who would guide them to victory. As they closed in on their prey, Sarah's pulse quickened. The herd of wild buffalo was just ahead, grazing peacefully in the valley below. She could see the warriors preparing for the final charge, their eyes fixed on the animals. The moment had come. Sarah gave the signal, and the group moved. As one. The hunt was fierce, but with Sarah at the helm, they were unstoppable. The buffalo fell one by one, the tribe's warriors working in perfect unison. By the time the sun began to set, the group had secured the herd, their victory celebrated with cheers and shouts of triumph. Sarah stood at the center of it all, her heart swelling with pride. She had done it. She had led the hunt, and the tribe had followed her. The warriors gathered around her, their expressions filled with respect and admiration. For the first time, Sarah felt that she had truly earned her place among them. She was no longer an outsider. She was a leader, and this was just the beginning of her journey with the Comanche. The days following the hunt were filled with celebration, but also with a heavy sense of expectation. Sarah had led the Comanche warriors to victory, but she could feel that the tribe's approval, though given, was still fragile. They had seen her skill, her strength, and her resolve, but now came the real challenge, leading them not only in battle but in peace, in the everyday tasks that held the tribe together. Her success in the hunt had earned her the respect of the warriors, but respect was not enough to solidify her place among them. She had to prove she was worthy of more. The chief had been watching her closely since the hunt, his eyes following her every move, assessing not only her leadership skills but her heart. His silence weighed heavily on Sarah, and she knew the time would soon come when he would speak of her future with the tribe. One morning, as the sun rose over the plains, painting the sky in streaks of purple and orange, Sarah found herself standing at the edge of the camp, looking out over the land. She had learned much from the Comanche, but there was still so much she didn't understand. The land, the people, the traditions, they were all so deeply rooted in a way of life that she had only just begun to grasp. And yet, she knew in her bones that this was where she was meant to be. As the warriors began their morning routines, Sarah was approached by the chief, his presence commanding but not unkind. He said nothing at first, only watching her with that quiet intensity she had come to know. It was a long moment before he finally spoke. "You have led our people, but that was just one battle. Now, you must prove your worth in peace. We are a people of warriors, yes, but we are also a people of honor and unity." Sarah nodded, her heart quickening. She had known this was coming. Leadership was not just about strength. It was about understanding, empathy, and the ability to make difficult decisions. "What do you ask of me?" she asked, her voice steady, though she could feel the weight of his gaze. The chief's eyes softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "There is a task that needs to be done, one that requires more than strength. It requires wisdom and patience. The elders have spoken of a gathering with our neighboring tribes, a time of peace talks and trade. They will come to us soon, and we must show them our strength not just in arms, but in spirit. You must help lead these talks." Sarah's mind raced. Peace talks. The very idea seemed foreign to her. She had been trained for conflict, for survival, for the hunt. But peace? She had never thought she would be called to lead in such a way. And yet, there it was. This was her next challenge. She could not back down. "I will do it," she said, her voice firm. "I will lead them in peace." The chief gave a small nod of approval, though his eyes were still calculating. "Very well. You have earned the right to lead this. But remember, peace is just as hard won as war. Do not expect it to come easily." The days leading up to the gathering were filled with preparation. Sarah spent hours with the elders, learning the intricacies of the peace talks, the traditions of the Comanche, and the complex relationships they held with the neighboring tribes. She had to understand not only the words of the agreement, but the spirit behind them. She spent time with the warriors, making sure they understood that their role in this peace was just as crucial as their role in battle. Sarah was not just a leader of warriors. She had to be a leader of minds, of hearts. The day of the gathering arrived, and Sarah stood at the front of the camp, watching as the neighboring tribes began to arrive. Warriors, women, and children from various tribes made their way across the plains, moving with purpose but without hostility. The Comanche warriors stood beside her, their faces set, their hands resting on their weapons, ready for anything. But Sarah knew that the greatest weapon in this battle was not strength, it was trust. As the tribal leaders approached, Sarah stepped forward, her heart steady but her mind racing. She greeted each leader with the respect they were due, her words measured, her tone calm. She did not want to show weakness, but she did not want to show aggression either. She had to strike a delicate balance, one that could either make or break the peace. The talks began slowly, with each leader speaking in turn, their words formal and deliberate. Sarah listened carefully, taking in every word, every gesture. There was a tension in the air, a weight of history and mistrust that hung heavy over the gathering. She could feel the eyes of the warriors on her, and she knew they were looking to her for guidance. She had earned their respect, but now she had to earn their trust. The talks were long, stretching well into the afternoon. There were disagreements, moments of tension where old wounds were reopened. But Sarah did not falter. She spoke when it was needed, her words careful, her voice unwavering. She knew when to push and when to pull back, when to offer a compromise and when to stand firm. As the sun began to set, the leaders of the tribes gathered around the central fire. Sarah could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The tension was beginning to ease, the walls between the tribes slowly coming down. By the time the final agreements were made, Sarah felt a sense of relief wash over her. The peace talks had been a success. The tribes would live in harmony for another year, their bonds strengthened by the mutual respect they had forged that day. As the warriors celebrated, Sarah stood at the edge of the camp, her heart full, but her mind still working. She had led them through the trial of peace, but she knew that the true test was still to come. Peace could be fleeting, and the challenges of the land would always be there. But for now, Sarah had earned her place among the Comanche, not just as a leader in battle, but as a leader in peace. The days after the peace talks were filled with a sense of calm, but the calm was deceiving. The work of peace was far more complex than Sarah had imagined. While the tribes had agreed to the terms and the warriors celebrated their victory, Sarah felt a heavy weight on her shoulders. The peace she had helped forge was fragile, and she knew the real test of leadership was not in the negotiations but in maintaining that peace. The tribe had accepted her, but the challenges she faced were just beginning. She had proven herself as a leader in battle, as a leader in peace, but now she had to prove that she could guide her people through the years to come. As the Comanche returned to their normal routines, Sarah found herself torn between her duty to the tribe and the lingering questions in her heart. She had earned their respect, but there was still something missing. Her connection to the land, the tribe, and the warriors felt strong, but deep down, she knew she was still an outsider in many ways. One evening, as the camp settled under a blanket of stars, Sarah sat alone by the fire, her thoughts consumed by the weight of her responsibilities. The crackle of the fire was the only sound that broke the silence around her, and she found comfort in its warmth. She had come so far, but there was still so much she didn't understand. What was her true place in this world? What was expected of her beyond the roles she had already filled? As she pondered these questions, the figure of the chief appeared from the shadows, his presence commanding yet calm. He had been silent for days, observing her, waiting for her to come to terms with the path ahead. He stepped forward, his eyes meeting hers. "Sarah," he said, his voice deep and measured. "You have earned the respect of your people, but now you must learn to lead them in ways you have not yet faced." Sarah stood and met his gaze, her heart steady but her mind still uncertain. "What do you ask of me?" she asked. The chief's eyes softened. "You must prove your strength, not just in words, but in your actions. There are those who still doubt your place among us. You must show them, and show yourself, that you belong here, not just as a warrior or a leader, but as a true member of this tribe. There will be a test, one that will challenge not just your strength, but your heart. The weight of his words settled heavily on Sarah's shoulders. She had already faced so much, and yet, the chief was right. There was still more to prove. She had been accepted into the tribe, but she had not yet truly become one of them. She had led the hunt, brokered peace, and fought alongside the warriors. But this new trial would be different. This test would not be one of physical strength or skill. It would be one of spirit. I will do what is asked, Sarah said, her voice firm. But what is this trial? The chief remained silent for a moment, his gaze distant as though considering her question. Finally, he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. You will be taken to the sacred lands of our ancestors. It is a place that holds the power to reveal your true nature. You will spend 3 days there, alone. You must survive on the land, without the help of your people, without weapons or tools. Only then will you prove that you are ready to fully join our ranks. Sarah felt the weight of the challenge settle on her. The sacred lands were known to be unforgiving, a place where only the strongest survived. The thought of spending 3 days alone in such a place was daunting, but Sarah had never shied away from a challenge. She had survived the wilderness before, and she would survive again. I accept the trial, she said, her voice steady. The chief nodded, his expression unreadable. Then prepare yourself. Tomorrow, at dawn, you will leave. The next morning, Sarah set out at first light, her mind focused on the task ahead. She was given no supplies, no weapons, only the clothes on her back and the knowledge she had gained from the land and the tribe. The journey to the sacred lands was long, and as she traveled further from the camp, she felt a growing sense of isolation. The world around her seemed to close in, the dense forest and rugged terrain forming a wall that separated her from the life she knew. When she finally reached the sacred lands, Sarah stood at the edge of the cliffs, looking out over the vast expanse of wilderness. The land stretched before her, wild and untamed, just as it had been for centuries. This was where the tribe had come from, where their ancestors had walked. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the weight of her ancestors' gaze upon her. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, the sounds of the forest surrounding her. She had no tools, no weapons, and no way of knowing what lay ahead. She had only herself and the land. The next 3 days were a blur of survival and reflection. Sarah moved with purpose, hunting, foraging, and finding water as she had learned to do in her time with the tribe. The first day was the hardest, as she fought her own doubts and fears. The silence of the land was deafening, and the weight of her isolation pressed down on her. But by the second day, something began to change. The land, which had once seemed foreign, began to feel like a part of her. She understood it in a way she never had before. She had not just survived, she had become a part of it. On the third day, Sarah stood on the edge of a cliff, looking out over the sacred lands. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the vast wilderness. She had completed the trial, and she knew in her heart that she had earned her place among the Comanche. She had faced her doubts, her fears, and had come out stronger for it. As she made her way back to the tribe, the chief was waiting for her, his gaze steady. You have passed the trial, he said. You are now one of us, not just in title, but in spirit. Sarah nodded, the weight of his words settling over her. She had proved herself, not just to the tribe, but to herself. She was no longer an outsider. She was home. As Sarah returned to the tribe after completing the sacred trial, she could feel the air shift around her. The journey back had been quiet, the vast expanse of the sacred lands behind her, but the weight of what she had just accomplished hung heavy in her chest. She had proven herself to the land, to the chief, and most importantly, to herself. But even as she walked back into the camp, she knew the hardest part was still ahead. The tribe's acceptance was one thing, but Sarah knew the true test would be living up to the honor that had been bestowed upon her. The chief had told her that she was now one of them, not just in title but in spirit, but those words were heavy with responsibility. The night Sarah returned, she found the camp in the midst of preparation. The warriors were sharpening their weapons, the women were gathering supplies, and the children were playing, their laughter ringing through the air. But there was a tension in the air as well. Sarah could feel it in the way the warriors moved, in the way the elders whispered among themselves. Something was coming, and it was clear that the tribe was bracing for it. As Sarah made her way through the camp, she was approached by the elder warrior who had been by her side since her first days with the tribe. His face was etched with age, but his eyes were sharp, filled with wisdom and experience. "There is unrest in the land," he said, his voice low but steady. "The peace we have forged is fragile, and there are those who would seek to tear it down. You have earned your place among us, but now you must prove that you are worthy of the trust we have placed in you." Sarah nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had known this moment was coming, but she had hoped it would be far off in the distance. Now, the tribe was preparing for something she couldn't yet see, but knew would test everything she had learned. The elder's gaze hardened. "The time has come for us to defend what we have built. We face a new enemy, one that threatens our very way of life. You must stand with us, not as an outsider, but as a leader. Your people need you, Sarah." His words resonated deep within her. She had led the tribe through peace, through the trials of the land and the trials of spirit, but now she was being asked to lead them through war. Sarah had been raised to survive, to fight when necessary, but she had never been asked to fight. For something this deeply personal, she had always believed in peace, in the hope that someday, the cycles of war and violence would end. But now, she knew that peace had to be defended. The following days were filled with preparations. The warriors honed their skills, practicing their strikes, refining their strategies. The women prepared food, while the children were kept close to their mothers, learning the stories of their ancestors, stories of strength and survival. Sarah spent time with the warriors, listening to their plans, offering advice where she could, and learning from their experience. But she also knew that the time for talk was running out. Soon, they would be called to fight. It was on the eve of the battle that the chief called Sarah to his side. He was sitting near the central fire, his face illuminated by the flickering flames. The camp had grown quiet, and Sarah felt the gravity of the moment as she approached. "Tomorrow, we face an enemy unlike any we have known," the chief said, his voice steady but laced with the weight of the upcoming conflict. "You have proven yourself, but tomorrow will require more than just strength. It will require the wisdom to know when to fight and when to hold back. The tribe will look to you, Sarah. We need you to lead." Sarah felt a mixture of fear and resolve rise within her. She had faced many trials in her journey with the Comanche, but this was different. The fear of failure, of losing those she had come to see as family, settled deep in her stomach. She had never imagined that she would be asked to lead in this way. "I will lead," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. "I will not let you down." The chief nodded, a look of approval in his eyes. "Remember, the land is with you. You are not alone. The warriors are ready, and the spirits of our ancestors are watching over you. Lead them well." That night, Sarah lay awake, her thoughts racing as she stared up at the stars. The weight of what was to come pressed down on her, but she knew there was no turning back. The next day, they would face the enemy, and she would have to lead them through the battle. As dawn broke, the camp stirred to life. The warriors gathered around the fire, their faces set in determination. The women whispered prayers to the spirits of the land, and the children watched in silence, understanding the gravity of the moment. Sarah stood at the front of the camp, her heart steady as she looked out over her people. She had earned their respect, but now she had to earn their trust once again. The battle would be fierce, but she was ready. She had faced the land, she had faced her fears, and now, she would face the enemy. As the warriors mounted their horses, ready to ride into the unknown, Sarah led the way. She rode at the front, her sword drawn, her eyes focused on the horizon. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment when she would prove that she was not just a leader in peace, but a leader in war. She would fight for her people, for the Comanche, and for the peace they had worked so hard to build. The battle was upon them, and Sarah knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter in her journey. She would lead her people to victory, or she would fall with them. There was no other option. She was ready. The battle began at dawn, the sun just starting to cast its golden light across the plains, stretching over the horizon as if to witness the coming storm. Sarah led the warriors forward, her eyes locked on the distant line of enemy riders approaching. The air was thick with tension, and the only sounds were the steady rhythm of hooves and the rustling of armor as the warriors prepared for what was about to come. Sarah's heart raced, but her grip on the reins was steady. This was the moment she had been preparing for. Her body felt the weight of the sword at her side, the sharp steel a reminder of the responsibility she had taken on. She wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting for the future of her people. She was their leader now, and her people were looking to her for guidance. The enemy was close now, just beyond the ridge, their numbers more than she had expected. The warriors beside her were quiet, their expressions grim but resolute. There would be no retreat. The charge would come soon. As Sarah looked back at her people, she felt a surge of determination. She had led them through peace, had earned their respect, but this was different. This was a battle of survival, a battle for everything they had fought for. The warriors, women, and children of the Comanche tribe stood behind her, and it was her job to lead them to victory. The enemy emerged from the smoke on the horizon, their faces grim and their weapons drawn. It was a large force, well-armed and prepared for a brutal fight. Sarah's mind raced as she calculated their next move. They outnumbered the Comanche, but the tribe had strength in their unity, in their ability to strike swiftly and decisively. The time for thinking was over. She gave the signal. The warriors surged forward, charging toward the enemy with a roar that echoed across the plains. Sarah's heart pounded as she led the charge, her eyes focused on the battle ahead. The sound of hooves pounding the earth filled her ears, the crash of weapons against shields, the shouts of warriors. This was the moment that would define her as a leader. The two forces collided with a thunderous roar, the chaos of battle erupting around Sarah. She was in the thick of it now, the sound of clashing weapons and the cries of the wounded filling the air. But Sarah moved with purpose, her sword flashing through the air as she cut through the enemy lines, her focus unwavering. She could feel the weight of every decision she made in the heat of battle, each strike, each move, a reflection of the responsibility she had taken on. The battle was brutal, each moment filled with violence and fear. But Sarah did not hesitate. She fought with everything she had, her strength, her training, her leadership guiding her every step. She could hear the warriors behind her, the sound of their hooves and war cries, their energy matching her own. Together, they were an unstoppable force, charging through the battlefield with precision and power. The enemy began to falter, their lines breaking under the pressure of the Comanche assault. Sarah could see the fear in their eyes as they realized they were losing ground. They had underestimated the strength of the Comanche, the unity of the tribe. The battle raged on for hours, the sun now high in the sky, casting its harsh light on the field. The enemy had been pushed back, but the Comanche were not done yet. Sarah could feel the exhaustion setting in, her muscles aching from the constant fighting. But she could not stop. Not now. She pressed forward, urging her warriors to push harder. The enemy was retreating, their ranks scattered and broken. Sarah's heart pounded with the thrill of victory, but there was no time to celebrate. The fight was not over yet. As the last of the enemy forces fled, Sarah stood amidst the battlefield, her sword still in her hand, her chest heaving with exertion. The field was littered with the bodies of the fallen, both Comanche and enemy alike. The victory had been hard-earned, but it was theirs. She had led them to it. The warriors gathered around her, their faces weary but filled with pride. The chief appeared beside her, his expression unreadable. He had watched the battle unfold from a distance, his eyes on Sarah the entire time. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice low. "You have proven yourself," he said. "Not just as a leader, but as one of us." Sarah looked out over the battlefield, her eyes scanning the faces of the warriors, the survivors of this brutal fight. She had led them through the storm, had proven that she could stand beside them, that she could protect them. She had earned her place among the Comanche. As the sun began to set, casting a fiery glow across the land, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. The battle had been won, but there would be more to come. There always was. The fight for survival never truly ended. But for now, Sarah had done what she set out to do. She had led her people to victory, and that victory would be remembered for generations to come. She had become more than just a warrior, more than just a leader. She had become a symbol of what the Comanche were, a people of strength, unity, and honor. The tribe had placed their trust in her, and she had proven that she was worthy of it. With that, Sarah turned back to her people, ready to lead them into whatever came next. She was no longer an outsider. She was one of them. In the days following the battle, Sarah stood at the edge of the camp, gazing out over the plains. The land was quiet now, the dust of battle settling in the air, but the weight of the victory felt heavy on her shoulders. The tribe had gathered around the fire, their faces filled with pride and exhaustion. They had fought hard, and they had won. Sarah had led them through the storm, but now, as the war drums quieted and the warriors returned to their families, she found herself wrestling with a new kind of silence, a silence she had not expected. The chief had spoken of her leadership, of her strength, but now, in the calm aftermath, she felt the weight of a new responsibility. She was not just a warrior, nor was she simply a leader. She was the one who held the future of the tribe in her hands. The trust they had placed in her was profound, and she knew that her journey was far from over. The tribe needed more than a victor. They needed a guide, a protector of their way of life. As the days passed, Sarah began to see the true extent of her new role. The warriors spoke of other threats, rumors of hostile tribes moving into their territory, whispers of challenges yet to come. The peace she had fought for, the peace that had seemed so hard-won, was fragile, and Sarah knew that her work was not finished. One evening, as the camp settled into the rhythm of the night, Sarah was once again approached by the chief. He did not speak at first, only standing beside her and looking out over the fires, the soft glow of the flames casting long shadows over the land. "The land is changing," he said at last, his voice carrying the weight of years of leadership. "The world we know is not the world that will be. The times are shifting. There are new challenges ahead, and the tribe must be ready." Sarah nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. She had felt the shift too, a tension in the air, a sense that change was coming, though she couldn't yet name it. "What must we do?" she asked, her voice steady. The chief turned to face her, his eyes sharp, but filled with the wisdom of a leader who had seen it all. "We must prepare for what is to come, and you must lead them, Sarah. You have proven yourself in battle. You have earned their respect. But now, you must guide them into the future." The weight of his words hit Sarah deeply. She had thought that the battle would be the end of the struggle, that victory would be the moment when everything settled. But the chief's words made it clear that peace was not something that could be won. It was something that needed to be maintained. It was something that needed vision, understanding, and strength. And Sarah knew that she was the one to lead them through this uncertain time. Over the next several weeks, Sarah worked tirelessly to strengthen the tribe's defenses, to train the warriors, and to prepare for whatever new threats might emerge. She spent time with the elders, learning from their wisdom, and spoke to the women of the tribe, hearing their concerns and offering her support. But it was not just the physical preparations that weighed on her. She spent many long hours in solitude, reflecting on what it meant to be a leader, what it meant to carry the burden of the tribe's future on her shoulders. One evening, as Sarah stood alone by the edge of the camp, she was joined by one of the warriors, a man who had fought beside her in the battle and who had become a close ally. He stood beside her, his presence silent but comforting. "You carry the weight of the tribe on your shoulders," he said softly, his voice rough from years of battle. "But do not forget that you do not carry it alone. We are with you." Sarah turned to him, her heart swelling with gratitude. He had been one of the first to believe in her, and his words meant more than he could know. "I will not forget," she said quietly. "We are all in this together." In the weeks that followed, Sarah continued to lead the tribe with strength and wisdom, her resolve unshaken by the challenges they faced. But she also began to understand that leadership was not just about strength or decision-making. It was about knowing when to listen, when to offer a hand, when to lead with compassion. It was about being the foundation on which the tribe could stand, even in the hardest of times. The tribe began to grow stronger under her leadership, their unity forged. Not just in the fires of battle, but in the quiet moments of understanding and respect that Sarah had nurtured. The warriors respected her, the women trusted her, and the children looked up to her as a symbol of strength and hope. Sarah knew that there were still challenges ahead, that the peace they had fought for would always be fragile, but she also knew that she was ready. She had proven herself as a warrior, as a leader, but more than that, she had proven herself as a protector of her people. And as the sun set over the plains, casting its golden light over the camp, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace settle within her. She had come far, and the path ahead was still uncertain, But she was no longer just a part of the tribe. She was the heart of it. And that was something no enemy could take from her. The days following the peace talks had been quiet, but that silence was broken with the arrival of something more ominous. Sarah had spent much of her time overseeing the rebuilding of the camp, making sure that everything was in order, preparing the tribe for whatever lay ahead. Yet, despite the outward calm, she could feel an undercurrent of tension. The warriors were more alert than ever, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon, always ready for any sign of trouble. The chief, though silent, had been no different. His thoughtful gaze seemed to miss nothing. One evening, as Sarah stood near the edge of the camp, gazing at the darkening sky, she felt a familiar presence beside her. It was the elder warrior, the one who had been with her from the beginning. He had stood by her during the trials, and now, his presence felt like a steadying force. "The winds are changing," he said, his voice grave. Sarah turned to face him, sensing that something was about to shift in ways they could not predict. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady but curious. "There are movements on the border," the elder warrior replied. "The neighboring tribes have been restless. It seems that the peace we fought for is fragile. It will not take much to unravel it." Sarah's heart sank. She had known that the peace they had fought for was not guaranteed, but hearing it spoken aloud made the reality hit harder. She had spent so much time fighting for the Comanche's survival, for their future, but now it seemed as though the future she had worked so hard to secure was under threat once again. The elder warrior looked at her with an intensity that told her he understood her fears. "You have proven yourself in battle, in leadership, in peace. But the time has come for you to prove your true strength. You will have to lead your people through this darkness, to guide them through what is to come." His words were heavy, and Sarah could feel the burden settle on her shoulders. She had already proven herself in many ways, but this was different. This wasn't just about leading warriors into battle or negotiating peace. This was about protecting everything they had built, everything they had fought for. "I will lead," Sarah said, her voice unwavering. "I will not let the tribe fall into chaos." The elder warrior gave a slow nod, his expression softening just slightly. "You are ready, Sarah. But remember, true leadership is not just about strength in battle. It is about the heart of the people. Lead them with both courage and compassion." The days that followed were filled with preparations for whatever lay ahead. The warriors drilled harder, the women ensured the camp was fortified, and the children were kept close, ready for whatever was coming. Sarah spent long hours speaking with the chief, the elders, and the warriors, trying to piece together what the future would hold. As the days passed, the tension in the air grew, and Sarah knew that the time for action was drawing near. One morning, as Sarah was preparing to speak to the tribe, a scout arrived, breathless from his ride. He had news. "The enemy approaches," he said, his eyes wide with urgency. "They are coming to take the land, to destroy what we have built. We must prepare for battle." Sarah's heart raced as she gathered the warriors. The time had come. The peace they had worked so hard to build was threatened once again, and it was her duty to defend it. She could feel the weight of every decision, every command. The tribe had placed their trust in her, and now, she had to lead them through the coming storm. "We will not let them take our land," Sarah declared to the warriors, her voice strong and clear. "We will fight for our people, for our future. Together, we are unstoppable." The warriors cheered, their voices rising in unity. The preparation for battle began immediately. Sarah moved among the men, offering words of encouragement, ensuring that every warrior understood the stakes. This was more than just a fight for survival. It was a fight for everything they had built, everything they had sacrificed. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the camp, Sarah stood at the front of the warriors, ready to lead them into battle once again. The moment had arrived. They were ready. The enemy was close, and they would stop at nothing to take what belonged to the Comanche. But Sarah knew, deep in her heart, that they would not be defeated. They had fought for their land before, and they would do so again. With her at the front, they would stand strong. They would fight for their home. As the battle loomed on the horizon, Sarah turned to face her warriors one last time. "We fight for our land, for our families, for the future of the Comanche. This is our time to stand strong. This is our time to prove that we will never be broken." And with that, the warriors surged forward, their battle cries ringing through the air as they charged into the unknown. The war for their survival had begun, but Sarah was ready. She had led them through peace, through trials, through darkness, and now she would lead them through war. She was their leader, their protector, and nothing would stop her from defending the tribe. The battle had raged for hours, the cries of warriors and the clash of steel ringing through the air, but as the sun began to set over the plains, Sarah knew the tide was turning in their favor. The enemy, though fierce, had underestimated the strength of the Comanche, and now, as their lines began to falter, Sarah felt a surge of both relief and anticipation. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when victory would be hers to claim. But victory came at a cost. As the enemy began to retreat, Sarah's gaze swept over the battlefield, taking in the fallen warriors, both Comanche and enemy alike. The ground was stained with blood, and the air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke. She had led her people through the battle, but now, the price of survival was clear. There were no celebrations, no triumphant shouts. Instead, there was only a quiet reverence for the fallen and a somber realization of what they had lost. The warriors, battered but undefeated, began to gather around her, their faces hard with the reality of what had just transpired. The chief approached, his presence commanding even in the aftermath of battle. His eyes, once filled with uncertainty about Sarah's place among the tribe, now held a deep respect for what she had accomplished. He placed a hand on her shoulder, the weight of his approval more meaningful than any words could express. "You have led us to victory," he said, his voice steady, though tinged with exhaustion. "You have proven yourself not just as a warrior, but as a true leader of the Comanche." Sarah nodded, but the words felt hollow. The battle had been won, but at what cost? As the warriors began to tend to the wounded and gather the fallen, Sarah found herself walking away from the campfire, the weight of her leadership pressing down on her with each step. She had fought for peace, for her people's survival, but now she wondered if it was all worth it. What had they gained? What had they lost? The land was theirs, yes, but the price of that victory was steep. As she walked alone, her mind drifted back to the quiet moments before the battle, to the words the elder warrior had spoken to her about leadership. He had said that true leadership was not just about strength in battle, but about understanding when to fight and when to let go. Was she truly ready to carry the weight of her people's future? She had led them in battle, but could she lead them in peace? The question lingered in her mind as the stars began to twinkle overhead, the vast expanse of the sky above her reminding her of how far she had come, and how much farther she still had to go. She had earned her place among the Comanche, but her journey was far from over. The trials she had faced, the battles she had fought, had only just begun. There would be more challenges, more sacrifices, and more moments of doubt. But Sarah knew that she was ready. The sun would rise again, and with it, a new day for the Comanche. And she would lead them into that future, one step at a time. The sound of footsteps behind her broke her reverie, and she turned to find the two brothers who had once owed their lives to her. They were standing a few paces away, their expressions serious but filled with gratitude. "We are with you," the taller brother said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You have earned our loyalty and the loyalty of the tribe. Together, we will protect our people, no matter the cost." Sarah looked at them, her heart swelling with pride. She had led them to victory, but it was their unity, their strength, that had made it possible. She had not done this alone, and she never would. "Thank you," she said quietly. "We will face whatever comes next, together." And with that, they turned back toward the camp, the firelight flickering in the distance, marking the beginning of a new chapter for the Comanche. Sarah had come to this land as an outsider, but she had found her place, her purpose, and her family. She was no longer just a warrior, a leader, or a protector. She was part of something greater than herself, something that would endure for generations to come. As the firelight danced in the distance, Sarah knew that no matter the challenges ahead, she was ready to face them. She had become a true leader of the Comanche, and she would lead them into the future with courage, strength, and honor. Immerse yourself in a world of thrilling Western stories, where bravery and honor guide the journey of a young leader. This tale follows Sarah, a warrior who rises from outsider to respected leader of the Comanche tribe. From battling for survival in a hostile land to leading her people through fierce conflicts, Sarah's journey captures the essence of what it means to fight for peace and protect those you love. Set in the rugged landscapes of the American frontier, these Western stories show the trials and triumphs of a strong and determined leader. In this story, you will experience Sarah's personal struggles as she proves her worth, gains respect, and leads the Comanche tribe through challenging battles. With each step, Sarah faces the harsh realities of the Wild West, but with a fierce determination, she becomes the heart of the tribe, shaping their future and ensuring their survival. Through victory and loss, these Western stories remind us of the strength that lies in unity and leadership. With challenges still ahead, Sarah's journey unfolds, proving that true leadership is built on strength, wisdom, and the unwavering spirit of the people. This is one of the unforgettable Western stories that will leave you inspired by courage, sacrifice, and the fight for what's right. Join Sarah as she takes on the world of the Western frontier and shapes the future of the Comanche tribe.